Hi guys, Michelle Fix It. Still July 26, 2023. I am laying down because I am overheated and you guys are charging and your temperature controlled enough where like you shouldn't be having any issues. You shouldn't die or anything like that. So I keep saying that I'm going to like talk to you guys about medical stuff. Take my sunglasses off. Ugh. And so I guess I'm going to while I'm like laying down. Like my neck looks so bad like this. Um, you guys make me self-conscious. Anyways, so in this little medical adventure of mine, that started because Charlie was like super medically complex and stuff. Um, I started to find out that I was a little medically complex because like when I was 19, well, before 19, I didn't have like any issues. I had sinusitis a couple times and that was it. Like I was otherwise in pretty perfectly good health. I got a job when I was like 14 and I, did normal high school stuff and, did a lot of stuff with like my vehicles and stuff as much as I could figure out at the time. And I did have a heat stroke whenever I was like, 16 or 17, somewhere around there. But other than that, like, and then I had a hernia, an umbilical hernia that I had fixed when I was 14. I didn't really have a ton of stuff. And then after I had my oldest daughter, at 19, I turned 20 the next month, like, I went back to work and it was a struggle. Like, something was wrong with me. And so I had my first ocular migraine, and I lost partial vision in my eye. I just couldn't function. I had to have, like, somebody help get me to the emergency room, and I was in there for like a day and a half, 2.5 days, something like that. Dark, cold room, lots of meds. I have no idea. And then after that, I just kept trying to find out what was wrong with me, and I got diagnosed with like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, and they're like, well, you have low blood pressure, but like once you get in your 30s it should resolve, otherwise it can like you might have to be on like heart meds, blah blah blah. And like they couldn't really figure out what was wrong with me. And so after several years of going to doctors in North Carolina and then in Hawaii, and they were military doctors and stuff, it was just kind of like I just had to deal with it. And I had like a messed up knee, but I was able to eventually get that fixed and got a bunch of different diagnoses along the lines, or along the time. And so I just kind of like dealt with my body, my mentality not matching up stuff, and would have to squat and like sit and do this and do that, and like just really know what I could do with my body based off of temperature and hydration or anything else. And like I've always been like the most hydrated person I've ever known. Yeah, there's the thing. I gotta fix it. There's so many things. Just leave it alone. So basically, like after Charlie was super medically complex, everyone was like, you really need to start getting your stuff figured out, because I had like other things, there were incidental findings, like when my life was semi squared up, like I don't know, just a bunch of stuff. So there's been different diagnoses, and I've had like a neurologist for Botox and stuff, which I'm like super overdue for. But along my venture recently, I found out that I had a Chiari malformation, and the only reason I found out about that is because my neurologist wanted to have another MRI done, because like my previous neurologist that was giving me Botox like several years ago said that I needed to get a scan done of my brain like every other year. And life happened and I just hadn't had a chance to do that. And so when, life changed, that and then going to a cardiologist and a bunch of other stuff was like really high up on my list, because Charlie had finally started to resolve. And so I told her, I said, hey, like I had some spots on my brain, supposed to be getting MRI every 2 years. And she was like, Gerbicata, like you should have been doing that. I'm like, okay, well, life and, children come first. And so she was like, well, we're going to, and I also had a lumbar puncture done, at the insistence of the neurologist. And at some point I have to track that stuff down. So when she had the MRI done, she sent me in the notes. She was like, everything looks fine. and like we're going to proceed with Botox. And I was like, okay, but then I read the chart or the report, and it's like, cerebellar tonsil ectopia, which is a Chiari malformation. So then I joined up on some of the groups and was like trying to figure all this stuff out. And then it was like, hey, you're going to need this gigantic surgery. And they called them like zipper heads and stuff. And then I was like really upset because I'm like, yay, to get something fixed. But then like that's a major thing. It's like literally brain surgery. And then I kept researching because like I just research until I feel like I know every single thing that I can on a topic. And then I just hold on to that and I try to share it with people. So now you guys, by default, get to learn about that stuff. And then I found like this minimally invasive one because it just happened to be on the images, because I do a lot of reading for like peer-to-peer review or peer-to-peer education for physicians. So I'll read what people are doing, if they're doing experiments, if they have a hypothesis and they're, running trials and, all this different stuff. And then I just happened upon, I think it was a lady that had a minimally invasive surgery done. And so it went from being like this gigantic scar to like a super small scar. And I was like, hey, that's like super awesome. It's still scary because it's brain surgery, but like that's super scary. But better. And then I was asking a lot of questions on like the Facebook groups and stuff. And then like this lady just happened, a different lady was like, hey, you could have an acquired Chiari malformation from a chronic CSF leak. And I was like, oh, okay, let me research this, because I had pretty much exhausted everything that I needed to know. But then I came upon Dr. Henderson, who is like a total rock star. He's got to be an Aspie cat. And so one of his seminars or lectures that he was giving was like, hey, like people that are connective tissues disorders or hypermobility issues, which like, I meet the criteria for both of those, and I have diagnoses for both. They can have cervical cranial instability, or CCI. And so like we have like a neck brace that you can try to use. Like he basically has all of this criteria that he wants you to do before you get to a point of even being able to see him, because he's such a super special cat. And then I learned about Pavlov cysts, which are like little barnacles, and so like they let pressure in and out of the spinal column. No, out of the cerebral spinal fluid. Yeah. And so when you're high pressure, like they leak more. When you're lower pressure, they like suck in. But you can have an acquired Chiari malformation because of that. And so one of his lectures, he talked about the fact that like one of the ways that you can very easily find out if you have a CSF leak is to lay down when you don't feel well. Because like chronic CSF leaks, there's a few doctors that are doing amazing, outstanding work on that and really helping people, but it's not widespread information. Just like the Dr. Ponzetti guy, who was the one that created the information and the gold standard for clubfoot treatment, because it used to be that they cut the feet, they basically cut open the feet, they take everything apart and then they put it back together again, and it creates a lifelong issue with arthritic pain and mobility issues, and possibly on some patients lifelong disability, even though they would otherwise have a lifelong disability anyways. So I was like, wow, like Dr. Henderson and this guy in California, this other doctor in California who started pulling people from the POTS clinic, was finding out that like maybe POTS isn't even really a thing, because maybe it's just a bunch of chronic CSF leaks, because they have similarities. But because this is not widespread information, it creates a big issue with the general public knowing about it, and then it takes months and months and months and a lot of dedication to even start to see some of the doctors that would have this diagnostic criteria. So going back to Dr. Henderson, he said that like if you don't feel well, just lay down. Like don't lay down to sleep, but just lay down to give your, I forgot what it's called, but basically the portion of your brain, there's an area of your brain that creates CSF fluid, and to allow for you to build pressure again and continuously create CSF fluid. And I did that. And he said, and it might not happen right away. So like if you're laying down for like a minute, you may not, because if you have a really substantial leak, but like it can create ataxia, it can create speech issues, it can create balance. List about it with the Chiari malformation stuff and like all the things that could happen with that. And I actually had like a ton of the symptoms for that. And so I laid down and I played with it where it was like I laid down on my right side, laid down on my left side, laid down on my back. And for me, laying down on my left side is the best thing for me. And so eventually timed it out and everything else. And so I just wanted to like share that criteria with you guys because I've done a lot of like little tests on myself, and I'm working on doing tests with other people. But since I was feeling, especially since the heat like exacerbates everything, I'm in the middle of a lay down period for me, which will be about 15 minutes, and then I will get up and I will see how I feel. So you guys can try this and see if it helps you, because sometimes it's not that you need a nap. Sometimes it's just that like you literally need to lay down because maybe you have a chronic CSF leak and you're just undiagnosed, and it takes so much effort. It takes initially just the knowledge of the chronic CSF leak to be able to know that this thing even exists, because I'm very irritated that it took me 17 years to get here. But I'm very excited because my lifestyle factors, now that I know about this and now that I've been running experiments with, caffeine, hydration, humidity, temperature, stuff like that, I can extend myself a lot more than I used to be able to, and I am less heat intolerant. Because I was just told after that heat stroke, like you may end up developing heat intolerance, you may end up having all these other issues. But the way that and so that was my excuse, oh, I had a heat stroke, so that's why I'm heat intolerant. And I didn't even think about the humidity factors and then the VOC. So it's like a multifactorial problem. But for me, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power for a lot of people. And I think there are a lot of people that are trying with what they have available to them, but they're hitting up against knowledge walls, because if that woman wouldn't have linked a video because she had an uncle or a father or some family member that had a fairly significant Chiari malformation, and then they stumbled across the acquired one, and then the acquired one led to the chronic CSF leak, then I would have never known. And I very well possibly could have been looking at getting brain surgery. So I'm still going through the motions. I'm still going through all of my doctor's appointments and stuff like that. Like I've had to reschedule, or I've missed a couple of the appointments because of lifestyle things that have happened with either my son or family issues and stuff. But I am going to continue on this trajectory, and I'm going to share the knowledge that I acquire during this journey, because it took me 17 years to get here. And if I can save somebody some time, then that would be fantastic, especially my children. Because if you guys don't know about the connective tissue stuff, like look up the Beighton scale, and that'll get you a beginning portion. And then like that craniocervical instability, I found it from my ortho because I asked him, and did like the next stuff and everything else, because the geneticist for Charlie said, oh, I don't think you have EDS, and I don't think you have hypermobility, and I was like super pregnant. And so it's like she took my diagnoses away, and I was really proud to actually be able to obtain it. And like I want to have things that are wrong or abnormal or disorderly about myself in a physical way, but knowing that I have things and having diagnoses on that is very validating, because then you can start looking at, okay, I have this, so how do I appropriately manage this? Because I've been trying to manage this personally with limited information, and it's been a trial and error effort. And so for me, when she tried to take that away, and then I went to my ortho, and then he re-diagnosed me with it, and then diagnosed me with cervical cranial instability, because like my head goes back all the way, and then like my chin and my face for the other direction, it goes back pretty far, and then I have hypermobility with the lateral stuff as well. So that was very validating. I didn't even know about the head stuff. I had heard about it with the Dr. Henderson and everything, but I didn't know that I met the criteria for it. So because I have these fancy smancy awesome doctors less the ones that are in the ER that I do not like at Johns Hopkins. I'm going to share that stuff with you guys. And so, like, as a little random extra tidbit, because, like, now I've been laying down for 15 minutes, I'm going to try to prop you guys up. Oh, I'm going to prop you guys up and show you the thumb thing and show you some of the other stuff and see if you guys meet the criteria for that, because, like, who knows? All these things that are supposed to be super duper rare haven't been as rare, because, like, now that I know about it, I'm seeing it everywhere, and I'm just like, hey, can you do this? And they're like, I didn't even know I could do that. I think there's a lot of leaky people out here. Just saying. Alright. And now my hair looks special. Alright, so I'm going to stick you like this and try to get your cord. Look, I was laying down, okay? Stop. Stop looking at me like that. I had to cut my hair. Like, trim it, not cut it off. I like the length of my hair. Okay. Ciao. Alright, so one of your things that you're going to do, I need nails, desperately. Oh, see, and even though, like, I didn't lay down and go to sleep, still yawning and everything. Alright, so you're going to have your arm out, and you're going to, like, just flop, like, see this is this. And you flop your wrist over, and then you're going to pull this down. And if you can do that, that's your first indication that, like, hypermobility or EDS, okay? And if you can do it on the other side. And if you're, like, close to 40, your flexibility does start to go away, so it's harder for this scale to work. The other thing is, if you have your arm resting on a table, and you can do this, that's one of them. I can't, like, hold it the right way for the camera, but basically if your finger goes back, and I can actually do it with a lot of them, and as I get closer to that hand surgery spot, it's harder to do it. Like, see, I lost mobility, but I can still get pretty good with it. So it's that. Your arms hyperextending. So, like, I guess a normal person wouldn't hyperextend like that. So if you can see that, like, this part of my arm just pops out. And I can do it on this side too, of course. If you can stand up and then put your arms down and touch floor, that messes me up because something pops out with me, so I don't do that one. The other one is that if you stand, you can hyperflex your legs. Or, let's see. Shrink you guys down. So, look, I need to go to the gym, okay? Don't judge my legs. But you see how, like, this all pops out further? And it is super difficult, even being a flexible person. So your legs backing up like that, they're not supposed to do that. It's one of those, like, what's normal, what's abnormal things. So those are the for, like, the main ones. I can also do, like, interesting things. Somewhere along the way, I saw this one, the backwards praying hands. No, you guys can't see it. Hold on. So these are all things that like you're not supposed to be able to do. So if you can do those things, not the praying hands thing, I saw that somewhere else, or the backwards praying hands. Those are all things that meet the criteria for the Beighton scale. Um, and so if you can do those things and you have more questions, then ask me questions. Because I'm going to try to make, like, if I see stuff, and I owe people videos, because I'm trying to pre-publish, and my thing was, because I have the 1 terabyte video thing, or memory card, and it's already full. And that was from like the Mississippi trip. So I have you guys posted to pre-publish until September, I think 15th or 16th, and today is June 20 or July 26th, 2023. And I didn't want to add more videos until I had all of that pre-published, but that's a lot of videos. Because I want to start responding to people with videos as I can keep up with it. But if you have questions when you get to this video about hypermobility, connective tissue disorders, things like that, because if you have a connective tissue disorder, you are more likely to have a chronic CSF, according to my research, and according to some very fancy smancy doctors that have more education than I do. And their peers are working on a lot of different things to try to work on their very teeny tiny little areas. But I have a huge hypothesis that this is not as rare as it would seem, because right now with the cardiogenetic stuff that I was looking at, it was like 5 to 20% or 15% of the population, which is still a lot of people. And then there's stuff with like epidurals. There's a lot of stuff, and not just epidurals. So if you're a male and you've been in a car accident and you got whiplash, or you fell the wrong way, you could have calcification in different parts of your vertebrae on your spine that could have punctured. And so this is something where, like, I think that this is a contributing factor for a lot of stimulant use and a lot of potential for so many different things. So many different things. And so, and if you can have a higher pressure, you can have a lower pressure. There's a lot of different things. And unless they do a lumbar puncture, unless you get like the myelith, some type of testing, and I can't remember because I've had too many things going on in my head. Well, not in my head, but like in my life. But there's a test where basically they insert dye into your spinal cord, and they see if the dye starts to go other places. And you can also have a chronic CSF leak in your nose. And one of the ways for you to be able to figure that out is, the glucose, because glucose and protein and something else are in the fluid for the CSF fluid, or the CSF fluid, the cerebral spinal fluid. And so if you have, a really super liquidy dripping out of your nose, and that's there all the time, no matter what you take, you potentially could have some type of damage in like in your ethmoid sinus or something like that. And if you have ossifites, then that's also an indication that, like, maybe there's previous damage and maybe that hasn't completely healed. Or if you feel like you always have stuff dripping down the back of your throat, and it tastes more metallic-y, or not as much of a musty thing, but like a metallic-y thing, then you could have a chronic CSF leak in your skull. So you can have one in your spine. You can get one if you had an improper epidural. Anesthesiologists are not going to say, "Oh, I think I messed you up." But if you have a super big stimulant thing and you meet the criteria of having some type of substantial injury, falling down a certain way, and then after that fall, it just seems like you couldn't get back up again, as far as like, your body and your mentality didn't match up. There's a lot of just different things with that. Epidurals, contact sports, just a lot of different things, because your brain is supposed to be floating in that CSF fluid, like a little buoyancy thing. And when that fluid goes down, your brain can go down, and that can create a whole host of different issues. And also, if you have too much pressure in your brain, so say you have a CSF leak, but then, like, for some reason you have found a way to create more of the fluid because your body is now overproducing on it, then you could have it where you have too much pressure on your brain, which can create a whole host of other issues. So if you guys want to know more about this stuff, like, I've been researching it, and I'll give you the information that I have. And now, like, I have 25 minutes on the clock, and I still need to check the weather report for the temperature to see if I can mow the grass at Georgetown. But yeah, I'm not just a truck and house person, homeschooling mom, medically complex mom. I have a lot of research that I've been able to absorb and maintain and categorize in my brain in a bunch of miscellaneous little boxes, and I'm more than willing to help people. I mean, that's all I say all the time. It's like, I want to help people. And some people just don't want to be helped. But if you do want help, then just ask me questions and I'll help you. That's it. And I'm just awkwardly waiting for you guys to time out. I shall see you guys next time. Maybe mowing the grass. Bye.